Awesome. Can you hear me? Is this okay? No, I think I turned something on. Hello? There we go. Awesome. So that was Erica Soto. She's a performer with the Grand Rapids Civic Theater, and she was singing Change is Gonna Come by Sam Cooke. Let's give her another round of applause. That was great. So welcome, everybody. I'm so happy that you could join us here tonight, whether you're here in person or virtually, for tonight's Growing Together. My name is Brett Karhoff. I'm excited to be the person that is welcoming you here. I have the honor of kind of attending under three different roles tonight. It's a little odd for me. I'm actually on the board for Arbor Circle as the treasurer. I'm on the board for the Grand Rapids Civic Theater as the treasurer, and if that isn't exciting enough, I'm also an accountant during the day for Hungerford Nichols, which is one of our sponsors tonight. So this year marks the third year of Growing Together, which is Arbor Circle's community commemoration of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s day. And tonight's discussion is going to explore a little bit about the impact of incarceration within our community. We'll highlight Dr. King's passion for ending systemic racism and poverty while focusing on the barriers for individuals re-entering the community after incarceration and the impact that that has on their families and their communities. As an extension of the Growing Together event, Arbor Circle is pleased to be partnering with the Grand Rapids Civic Theater as they launch their production of Clydes, and that runs from January 19th through the 28th at the Civic Theater. The play explores the tremendous hurdles that formerly incarcerated folks face in life outside of prison walls. And if you're interested in hearing more about that or learning more, you can check it out on the Civic Theater website, which is grct.org, and we also have a table out front. I'm also excited that tonight we have a representative from the Civic Theater, Jared Gabriel. We have Amisha here. We have the director of Clydes is here tonight. So I'd like to, if you have a chance, Amisha Gross, to come up and say a few words for us.
Coming down here. Good evening. My name is Amisha Gross, and I have the privilege of directing the show Clydes at Civic Theater. This is Patricia Ansari, and she has the pleasure of being one of the actresses who plays Clydes. Patricia, do you want to just talk for a quick second about what that experience has been like for you? And
sure.
Then I will.
Sure. I am very delighted to be here, and thank you guys. And I am very honored to be able to be under her directorship. The play about Clydes is about my character has been incarcerated. Everybody that I hire has been incarcerated. I'm a stern, surly woman that I don't take any crap. So I'm not the nicest person, but I do it out of love to keep them motivated to keep going and to see that if you want to keep dealing with me, you know, or don't get in any more trouble, because this is the type of persons that you might end up dealing with. But the cast deals with a lot. It's not just me, it's the cast. They deal with a lot of stuff about coming in out of incarcerations. We have one character who is a Caucasian who has hate tats on his face where he had to do that to survive in the inside, and so he speaks about that. We have a female that did a little bad things, and she got in trouble and went and got incarcerated. We have another Hispanic young man, I love him too, Sage. He is there for another reason or another. Everybody's a felon. Everybody is a felon, and everybody's been in trouble, and everybody's done some things that they shouldn't have done and that they're not happy about. So they come here and they learn from another man named Montrellis, who actually went to prison for somebody else. He did some time for.
Don't give it away.
Oh,
spoiler!
Jesus, I'm sorry. Y'all better come. Now, don't make me turn into the character now. I'm being nice for her.
All
now, right. Okay.
All right.
But it's nice for you guys to come and check it out because you get to see the lives of how people interact outside of being, let back in, and the problems they have, the social problems, everything. So you'll be able to learn a lot about that.
Thank you, Patricia.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Should have said spoiler alert. I didn't know she was going to say that. So, shh, you didn't hear that here. Those of you online, you didn't hear that either. I was asked to share a portion of the article that my daughter, Nadia Gross, and I wrote as part of our research for the play. And so I'm going to just go ahead and read a portion of that. We called the article Second Chances. And this is a portion of that. A portion of the full article can be read in the electronic playbill for Civic Theater. So if you'd like to read that and get the resources for where we got some of our information, feel free to do that as well. America, land of the free, is the country with the largest prison population worldwide. The loophole of the 13th Amendment, which permitted free forced labor as part of the sentencing of those convicted of a crime just after slavery was abolished, led to convict leasing and gave rise to the lucrative business of mass incarceration. Today, 8% of our nation's citizens hold a felony charge equating to over 20 million who are, in effect, second-class citizens as their right to vote has been stripped away. In addition to revoked voting rights and scarce employment opportunities, ex-convicts also endure housing restrictions, salary caps, travel bans, and discrimination in court custody cases. These pending realities were and still are disproportionately true for people of color. It is no accident that Jason is the only white employee at Clyde's. While there are circumstances that warrant these parameters be put in place to keep others safe, as with violent or sexual offenses, more often than not, those neglectful punishments make it harder to rebuild a sense of everyday life after prison. With all of these difficulties thrust upon them, many return to addiction, like Raphael, leave their children with substandard caregivers, like Letitia, or live on the streets, like Jason. These barriers take away human rights, which can cause anyone to question the existence of their own humanity. Bleak. The dream? Here's our sandwich. We abolish the prison system machine by changing our perspective on those who serve, revamp rehabilitation, and support outlets reducing the rate of recidivism. We educate ourselves and volunteer time or money to organizations fighting to end felon disenfranchisement. Right now, we use Clyde's as an opportunity to walk in a pair of shoes that aren't our own and consider why each character might keep a job, why they are not treated, or where they are treated so poorly while clinging to hope. Yes, they have all done something, as Letitia shares, but this, America, is the land of second chances, is it not? Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your patience as we arrived a little bit late, and I hope that the rest of your evening is full of rich conversation.
Great, thank you so much. And hopefully everybody has an opportunity in the next couple of weeks to go watch a production of Clyde's. So now I'm pleased to present the Director of Equity and Inclusion at Arbor Circle, Enid Gaddis, who will be leading the rest of the conversation for tonight. So Enid.
All right, welcome everyone. I want to thank everyone for being here. We want to recognize our sponsors. You can see them all on the screen. They are part of the group of folks who made this event possible, so thank you to all of you. We're going to start out our conversation. I'm going to try to remember what they told me to do to make the slides move, but we're going to start out our conversation with just a few stats, and then we are going to have our panel come up. So we had Erica, we had me. So we're going to get into this a little bit more with the panel, but essentially what we want you to know is that there are about 53,000 Michigan residents who are incarcerated in various types of facilities in Michigan. And so you can see that you can see how they're broken down: state prisons, federal prisons. You can see over in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, there is a phrase that says Indian country. That is not Arbor Circle language. That is federal government language to identify folks that are incarcerated under tribal jurisdiction. So just wanted to acknowledge that, because that's probably not language that we would have used to describe that population. So let's keep going. So this slide, and it may be a little bit difficult for some of you to see, the print is a little small, I'm sorry about that. This slide is comparing Michigan's residents and against how they show up in the state populations. So if we go over to the far left where it says white, so there are 74% of our population in Michigan, thereabouts, is white. They represent 43% of the population in prisons and 57% of the populations in jails. Now, if you keep going over to the right, Black residents represent just 13% of the population, but they represent 51% of the population in prisons and 36% in jails. And we can keep going along, but what we want to point out is the disparity. 13% of the population is a huge overrepresentation in the prison system, and that's what we want you to see, which also means, as this slide states, that Black people are overrepresented in the incarcerated population, while white people are underrepresented. And then when you look at incarceration in Michigan, you can see Michigan has a significantly high rate of incarceration. You probably can't read the fine print, but it says that these are incarceration rates per 100,000 people in the population. So you can see for the United States, it's 664 per 100,000 people are incarcerated. Michigan is second, the highest in the United States at 599. And then you can see all of the other, these are all countries. So it shows you that the US rate of incarceration far exceeds other countries, and Michigan is, as a state, is the highest. All right, we're just gonna use that as a backdrop. Now, I will say we are, our group that got some of these statistics together for you, we are not experts in incarceration, but we do have some experts. So they are going to correct, clean up, and clarify everything that we just talked about. So I'm gonna ask our panel to come up. We're going to get into our panel discussion. We have a few, you all can come this way or that way. We have a few questions that we've prepared for the panel to address, and then we're going to open it up for some audience Q&A. So if you have questions, you'll have an opportunity to address the panel directly after we finish the questions that have already been prepared. Do y'all have? All right, so our distinguished panel, they are somewhat sitting underneath their names. Hopefully you can recognize them. We have Mike Cole, who's one of our clinical managers at Arbor Circle. We have Richard Griffin, we have Wes, and we have Dee Dee. And so they all represent different sectors of folks that support incarcerated individuals. So you'll get to hear a little bit about them and their background. Wes works for Michigan Works, working in some employment programming. Dee Dee has a variety of lanes that she's in. She is the founder of a nonprofit, Tailor-Made Reentry. Dee Dee also has a loved one that is incarcerated, and so she's an advocate in both spaces. Rich is doing a million things. I can't even begin to describe all the things that he's doing. He's a member of the City of Grand Rapids, I can't see around, Safe Task Force. He's also the director of the Cure Violence program or initiative with Grand Rapids Urban League and several other things. And then Mike is a clinical manager with our community-based recovery program at Arbor Circle, and has done a lot of work with individuals that are leaving incarceration. So that is our panel, and I have dropped my paper, so excuse me. All right. So my first question, I am going to, let me put that on the screen. So each one of the questions that you see tonight, we framed it with a quote from Dr. King. So this quote says, "Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality." So I'm going to start with you, Dee Dee, and we'll just kind of go down the row. Please describe the challenges, needs, opportunities experienced by returning citizens.
Sure. Some of the major challenges that come to mind are housing, employment, and transportation. Mm-hmm. And some of the things that we can do to overcome those challenges are advocate for policy changes, be more aware of the process that happens when individuals are released, and just having an open mind to wanting to share a space with a person who have been impacted, because so many people are scared of those individuals, and they're still human at the end of the day. So those would be my top three things.
Thank you. Wes?
Yeah, I think in the employment space, the top of the mountain for challenges is finding employers that are willing and open-minded to hiring those with a criminal background. It's an uphill battle. It's one we fight every single day. We can provide these individuals, these returning citizens, with all of the training, education opportunities, but if you can't find businesses willing to take a chance and change their own mindset about it, then it's going to continue to be an uphill battle. But as we work down, returning to society, we're looking at education. Do we need GED? Do we need training and classes? Do we need to look at any other supports and barrier removals that we can offer to help get them into that space? But the top one is obviously finding employers.
Yeah, thank you.
I would say, from my experience working with this demographic and population of folks, greatest struggle is going to be psychological, emotional, and social reintegration into a society that they are foreign to, and this is all going to be dependent upon how long that individual was away from society. You see a different level of need for folks who, let's just say, under 10 years or their experience was more extensive than 10 years. So I would say the emotional and psychological needs and mental health therapy that is required for these folks that are returning. So
you're talking about folks who have been incarcerated 10 years or longer?
Yeah, for those folks who haven't served 10 years, the experience is different. Mm-hmm. I say this from lived experience. I myself served 23 and a half years in the Department of Corrections here in Michigan, fully apprised of what reintegration looks like for a person who served that long. But to that point, for folks who are serving, let's say 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, the psychological impact, the trauma just isn't as heavy as it is for those folks who have served longer.
Thank you. Mike?
The population that my team works with is out of the county jail, so it's a little different than the folks that have spent a little more significant time. We only have them for a few months. So I think one of the obstacles I think about is just, I don't think whether it's the state or the country puts our money where our mouth is. Mm-hmm. We're not serving people very long. And so there's a ton of people that go through the jail and never get any real help. But I will throw in there, since I'm a psychologist, I always, one of the obstacles is also the psychological needs of the client. You really have to help them see what they can do to empower them to believe that if they do something different, it will work out. You have to, they have their own, each individual's different, but they have their own obstacles also that they need to overcome and figure out.
Thank you. All right, question number 2. The quote says, "One of the great liabilities of history is that all too many people fail to remain awake through great periods of social change. Every society has its protectors of the status quo and its fraternities of the indifferent who are notorious for sleeping through revolutions. But today, our very survival depends on our ability to stay awake, to adjust to new ideas, to remain vigilant, and to face the challenge of change." So question number 2, and I'm going to start with, Rich, I'm going to start with you for this question. What type of supportive relationships do returning citizens need as they reintegrate into society? And a follow-up to that is, what barriers exist that make it difficult to develop these types of relationships?
Incarceration itself is the primary barrier. The moment that we send one of our residents to the carceral state, if you will, we are severing familial ties. If those familial ties are not fed, are not fostered throughout the duration of that individual's incarceration, I'll just say that is the most important relationship, whether that is with a guardian, a parent, an aunt, an uncle, a brother, a sibling, those familial ties. And when we sever that with just the act of sending this individual away from their community to be housed in a rural area in the city that may be anywhere from 3 to 9 hours away from family, that is the most important relationship, and we sever it the moment that we send our residents away to incarceration.
Dee Dee?
Sure. I got to look at the question. I'm sorry. For me, this really hits home for me because family relationships are important. As she mentioned, my father has been in prison just about all of my life, so I've never had a life experience with him. So when I think about our relationship, and I've even spoken to men in the inside that are concerned about coming home, coming back to these family relationships. So I would say the biggest thing is just, again, if we can have community understanding, if we can have family understanding, and if we could just be empathetic to that process, I think it would be very helpful for those individuals who have been impacted.
Thank you. Wes, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think, I mean, obviously family stands out, but I know from my perspective, the world's coming at people fast when you walk out of those prison doors, right? And there's a lot of needs, and trying to quantify which is more important than the other can become tricky. Employment is right there. I mean, the research shows how big a deal that is in reducing recidivism, but at the same time, it's hard to hold down a steady job if you don't have a place to go home at night. You don't have food to put on your table and an ID to get where you need to go, and all these other things that go down the list. So I found working with people like case managers and some of those probation officers that are more engaged, that can help them navigate, okay, here's your situation, here's where you're at, here's who you need to go see today, and then they can come see us when it makes sense for that individual, because everybody's different. So having that holistic view becomes incredibly important.
Rich, I'm going to ask you to maybe, just from your perspective, share a little bit about what barriers do you think exist that make it difficult to develop these relationships?
Yes, what barriers? So, real quickly, just you picture an individual, male or female, returning from 12 years of incarceration. They don't have parents, their siblings have passed away, they were older, and that person has a girlfriend or boyfriend. When that person returns to their community, to the home that they may share with their significant other, that significant other isn't prepared to deal with the psychological and emotional impact that this person is dealing with or carrying with them. So the first barrier is the idea that the individual that individual has about reintegration themselves, because there's this need to attach to something, and if it isn't, a parent or a guardian, then it isn't the same relationship. So the barrier is actually created by the individual returning to the community because of what they believe the need is in that moment. And to the young man's point, when we look at employment being one of the biggest issues that some of our returning folks are having, when there isn't a foundation to go back to, a grandmother, an uncle, a grandfather, a mother, a father, an older sibling that can give that individual some anchoring and give them some wise advice, then usually they're going to have more problems than not. So to answer the question, the barriers are actually created by the individual coming out because of what they believe they need, and oftentimes we just don't know best in those moments.
Thank you. Anything you want to add, Dee Dee?
One thing I did want to include is mentorship. I think mentorship is very important for individuals who are coming home and to kind of assist with some of those challenges. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say, but I did think that was important.
Thank you. And can you talk about that too from the work that you do with your nonprofit? Is that you see that as a need with
Absolutely.
The individuals you're serving?
Yes. So what I do in tailor-made reentry is we provide pre and post-release services. Pre-release services, meaning 6 months to a year before individuals are released. We're focusing on hard skills, soft skills, developmental skills, any type of skill that would make them successful. And then right after they're released, they come right back to me for that more intense case management process where we dig into those barriers and challenges and so on. And from my experience, one of the biggest things that I see is individuals coming home with no support, no family. As Rich said, people have passed away, moved on, and having a strong mentor or having somebody just to have your back and let you know that you're not alone is very, very important. Most of those individuals already feel alone. Just being inside, isolated, not really being able to control your moves or emotions and so on. So mentorship is very huge for me. Even when I go inside of the jails and individuals just see a fresh face, a new face. They're just yearning to talk and want to know more and see how they can improve. So again, mentorship, I believe in it. I think that we can all make a difference in somebody's life, and that's what I have.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to go off script a little bit. I wonder if any of you all see differences in what some of the challenges or barriers are for returning citizens based on their gender. Is it different for a mom or a woman coming home than it is for someone else of a different gender? What is, even though some of the struggles are the same, it seems like they could look different. And by your facial expression, Rich, I think you're raising your hand.
They are. Prior to me being at the Urban League of West Michigan, I worked for an organization called American Friends Service Committee in Ann Arbor in the Ypsilanti area. And we work primarily on like commutations for women who are incarcerated. And there's about, I would say 1,600 to 2,000 women who are incarcerated in the Department of Corrections, one facility for women.
In Michigan.
In Michigan. And this is the largest growing population of incarcerated person that we are seeing. They have barriers and needs that men just don't have. Most men, while incarcerated, their children were with a guardian or someone else in the family, primarily the mother. When women are coming home, that isn't the case. They're looking for their children in their families or foster care or whatever the case may be. The same primary barriers are the, education, employment, housing, etc. But for women, it is different. And also for Michigan, very stark number that you had up here. And I remember mentioning this a couple of months ago at an event where Michigan is second only to the United States in largest incarceration population. So we are second in the globe on earth in how many folks are incarcerated. The United States only holds 5% of the world's population, but we hold 25% of the world's incarcerated population, and Michigan is right on par with that. Michigan is notorious for incarcerating children. We had the largest juvenile lifer population, only second to Pennsylvania. I am part of that demographic. I was a 16-year-old serving 2 life sentences in the Department of Corrections here. When these folks return to our communities, young men and women who were incarcerated, 14, 15, 16, 17 years old, to serve the rest of their natural lives in prison, we are at a disadvantage in dealing with them because these children have been ostracized, ridiculed, dejected, and beat with trauma for years of just being incarcerated as a kid. So I would say the juvenile lifer population, and not to differentiate by race, but any woman that is returning from incarceration in Michigan is a very special population and has special needs that other folks just don't have.
Anybody else want to speak to that?
Yes, I did want to speak to it. As far as my experience, what I see women struggling with the most when returning home is I see those emotional barriers coming out a lot more. Rich did touch on mental health and what that looks like, but I feel like the women struggle a lot more with that mental health aspect, especially because of children, family, and those are important things to most women. And for men, some of the challenges I see, again, is reconnecting with their families, reforming those relationships, and not to mention their children is huge.
Mike, you want to get in on that?
Well, I can only speak from the perspective of the jail, which is a little different, but they're spending less time. But I would say the women that we're working with, their trauma is more significant, and there's a lot more shame usually associated with what got them incarcerated. How they earned their money and how they lived, there's just more baggage there. And so that's a lot to overcome when you're going home to a family who might have some judgments about that and some opinions. Another piece of that that I've seen that's a little more difficult that we don't seem to have with the male population, almost inevitably right before they get out of jail, an old boyfriend comes out of the woodwork and all these plans we had set up are now gone. And so relationships are just, I don't know why men and women are different, but are much more fragile, I guess, for women. And they more frequently drift right back before they even leave the jail. And so I do know that there's a relationship piece in there that's much more powerful for women than it is men. That might be a reflection of how men are, but and another piece I would throw in there is, it was kind of hit on with mentorship, but I really believe, you know, and this is going to sound kind of weird when I say it, but I'm a middle-class white guy, and so when I sit in a jail with a young black youth, they really aren't looking at me like this dude knows what he's talking about, right? So there's some barriers there just from me selling the program to them and trying to get them into it. And I can tell you story after story after story where a peer that's lived it, that's been down that road, that's re-entered society, can make inroads so much faster than I can. So I think we should use more peers, people that have been down that road, experienced the journey. People just gravitate to it faster. There's just more trust there. There's more willingness to hear the story.
Thank you. So Mike's talking about there are certifications where peers, people with lived experience, not just in being formerly incarcerated, but many other different areas too, work for agencies like Arbor Circle, and they come alongside programs to support people in whatever their journey is. But we have peers that are supporting individuals that are leaving the jail.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and people that are struggling with addiction, we have peers
Yes.
that help with that on our community-based teams too.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Okay, back to our script. All right, question number 3. The quote says, "No revolution is executed like a ballet. Its steps and gestures are not neatly designed and precisely performed." And the question is, what strengths do you see in returning citizens and their communities? And what approach do you take to build on these strengths? So we've talked a lot about challenges, but these individuals have strengths, and we want to hear what you think some of them are. I'm going to start with you, Wes.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I had the opportunity to kind of screen Clyde's ahead of time, and I won't offer any spoilers. But looking at the dynamic in that kitchen and seeing the strengths is what really stood out to me. The passion for the job, the willingness to go to great lengths to be there on time every single day, how important that was to them. The accountability that they shared with each other, not just with life and staying sober in one case, but also the actual job they're doing and providing the food for the people out in the dining room. So a lot of those strengths really stood out. And so we try to utilize that and trying to go down a road of not just providing services, but trying to figure out what are your passions when we sit down with you? What do you want to do? We don't want to just find you a job. We want to help you set you on course for a career, because that's going to lead to longer term success from our perspective. And so those were some of the things that stood out.
Yeah, thank you. Rich? Go ahead, Rich.
I think Dee Dee mentioned mentorship, and we talked about peer-to-peer support in these spaces. And I think that that's extremely important in teasing out those strengths. In my position currently, I'm the director of Cure Violence, and we have a team of, I want to say 13 now, where we have 6 violence interrupters, and then we have 6 case managers who deal primarily with at the highest risk youth that we have here in the city, and most of them are coming from incarceration. Most of our client base is being referred to workforce development at the Urban League, housing at the Urban League, education at the Urban League. But these are folks who are returning from incarceration who have skill sets, from strategic planning to organizational knowledge of organizational structure. I know men and women who are, without the certification, are paralegals and oftentimes better lawyers than some of the folks that represented them. But these are skill sets that they often do not realize is a viable thing for them to lean into until they have a mentor or a peer-to-peer specialist who's able to help them tease that out after being reintegrated into society themselves and showing them and giving them the direction to capitalize on those strengths.
Thank you. Mike?
I'll say, I think most of my clients are pretty resilient. Like some of them have been through, frankly, hell. And they keep getting up and trying again the next day. So you got to give them a lot of credit. It's really easy to critique the behavior or what got them there, but if you just listen to their life story, they're strong. They're still getting up and trying again. So I would say that's a strength that they have. Like they haven't given up.
Thank you. Go ahead, Dee.
A couple of strengths that are notable to me is, as he mentioned, very resilient. I'm sorry, very, very resilient. Anybody who can spend a day behind bars, I think, should be given a little bit of credit, because I could never do anything like that. And another thing that comes to mind is their wanting and yearning for change. They want to make a positive impact. They want people to see them in a better light and to really have a second chance and make the best of that. And some of the ways that we can support these things, because individuals incarcerated, they're actually very talented. They're very unique. I've seen skills that I've never seen before behind bars. So some things that we can do on the outside are create initiatives that support those talents. Be active in community and creating things that we can, as far as mentorship opportunities, peer-to-peer opportunities that can actually support that transition. I think this is a community effort. It's just not a organizational effort. It's not an individual effort, but it's a community effort. So we all need to really do our part in that.
Thank you. Audre Lorde says there is no single issue struggle, right? So that means that, and we see that in the folks that we serve at Arbor Circle. When someone comes in our door, they may be coming in our door for mental health or substance use support around those things, but those are individuals that also have concerns about housing. They also may have concerns about their children's education. So I appreciate you saying that, because it really does take the community coming together. No matter how fabulous our organizations are, we cannot solve all of the problems of people who may be coming in our door because we have expertise in one thing, right? Or maybe our circle has expertise in a few things, but not everything. All right, thank you. All right, question number 4. The quote says, "I am sure that none of you would want to rest content with the superficial kind of social analysis that deals merely with effects and does not grapple with underlying causes." So the question is, what wisdom do you wish to share with organizations or individuals seeking to serve and support returning citizens? What wisdom do you want to share with organizations or individuals? I'm going to start with you, Mike, and then we're going to ease on down the road.
I probably have a long list, so I'll try to keep it. If you show up to work, don't just show up and go through the motions, because it really doesn't help anybody. You have to really be into this if you're going to do it, because I see it all the time where people do a group, and the group's really just a class, and that's not really what the group's for. So when you offer a service, put forth some effort, and then watch it over time, do some supervision, be in it, and give feedback and train young people. Because a lot of people think they're good at something and they're really not that good. And so you really have to push people to stay, kind of use the fidelity of the program. And then I would also say, we as a nation, but in this county, I'd say we need to put our money where our mouth is. And
You've said that twice, Mike.
I know it. You can tell I'm a little frustrated about the money flow. But I feel like we underfund this population. I think they're a throwaway population. I think we don't have to think about them when they're in the Kent County Jail, when they're in prison, and I know there's a vengeance piece. There's anger. I get it, but if we really want to attack this, we need to start providing money to serve this population, so that they never return.
Thank you.
Wow, I don't know if I can follow that up with much better. No. This is a special population. If you do not have onboarding processes in your organization, in your corporation, in your company, for returned citizens, you are going to fail at best practices with them. It is for certain you will. For individuals, if you do not view these folks as human, you are going to fail at the reception of them, and they are going to fail at the reception of you. These are human beings who have been traumatized in their life, and then that trauma compounded with more trauma, as incarceration has been their reality for some time. I don't want to. There's something particular that I don't want to miss in that. We spend, Michiganders, like $2.2 billion a year locking up about 60,000 people. We keep about roughly 60,000 folks incarcerated at a bill of $2.1 billion. This is coming out of my pocket, your pocket, our pockets. We would rather spend money on incarcerating an individual who we don't know their background, their lived experience, their traumas, before we investigate the issue or pay for education to give them a different trajectory in life. This is large in part a reflection of what our society is, and not so much some of the individuals that we damn with the scarlet letter of being an ex-felon or an ex-con. So on the individual level, be mindful that these folks are humans. Only 1% of the prison population in Michigan will never be released. So most of those folks, sometimes they may be speaking on a panel to you at the Wealthy Theater.
I think I would add, in my experience, is looking not just at what you do and what your organization does, but what do others do as well. I think the more continuity we can have across the whole spectrum of services and wraparound support, the more holistic we can be in working together, the greater the chances we're going to see for success in the end. So getting out and meeting people and understand what everybody else does, warm handoffs, hot handoffs, being able to work better together on our end.
I would say creating a space for positive change, open communication, comfortability for individuals coming home, and not to mention, very similar to what I do in my program, is create tailored services. Not everyone is going to fit into one space or one service, so making sure each individual is catered to independently and they have those specific needs and resources catered to is very, very important. And lastly, overall, my mission in tailor-made reentry is to bridge the gaps between community law enforcement and those impacted by the criminal justice system. And a part of that is eliminating those negative stigmas that we have behind law enforcement, impacted citizens, and just community overall. So just keeping those in the back of your mind and eliminating those biases that may come up, I think will really be helpful during this process.
Thank you. You were reading my mind, because obviously being in the DEI space, I want to talk a little bit about bias, and we have a few minutes. So tell me from you all's perspective in serving, or what you've experienced, maybe Dee Dee as a family member, or you, Rich, what bias do people experience when they're trying to seek support either from individuals, family members, or organizations, systems? What bias shows up even from people, to your point, Mike, who are committed to doing the work? What bias do you see? Go ahead, Dee Dee.
Oh, sure. So some biases that I guess the bias that I see the most, I'll say, is individuals just feeling guilty, or it's like ashamed is what I really see. So the biggest bias when they come into the office, they're like whispering what their charge is or what they need support or help with, because they're so embarrassed. And it's really hard to get over that embarrassment sometimes. So I would say the biggest bias is individuals just thinking that you're going to treat them like a guard used to treat them, or you're going to treat them like a bad person, and things of that nature.
Thank you. Anybody else? What bias do you see?
The biggest one is that most folks in America receive returned citizens or impacted persons as though, well, whatever they were there for, they deserved it. They committed the crime, they need to do the time. That's a general philosophy that we have, and it's just absurd. Real quickly, if I may, I know Dee Dee's father, who is incarcerated. He and I were good friends growing up together from the time we were about 6 or 7 years old. We even spent about 24 months in a cell together as cellmates at one point in time. I think we may have even went to prison for the same issue, if I'm not mistaken. But to that point, I've seen young men and women in these spaces who they don't deserve to be there. I've seen teenage Caucasian kids who would never come out of their cell because they were afraid. They were persons who didn't belong in prison. They made a bad decision. On one day, it was the worst day of their life, and they made a very difficult choice that changed the trajectory of the rest of their life. I've seen young men and women, older men and women who were incarcerated. I've worked on commutations for women who killed their abuser during an attack. These women received 2 and 3 life sentences for some of these crimes when they were only protecting themselves. So the biggest bias that I see is we have in the back of our mind that if this person served 15, 20 years, if they were convicted by a court of law, then they deserve to be there and they should serve their time, do their time, and come home and be a productive member of society. That is not real. It is not.
Thank you. Anybody else? Good. All right.
One thing I did
go
want to
ahead.
ask,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry
sure.
about that. About bias, as far as bias, community bias. That's one thing that, again, I'm strong on, I'm big on, because we need our community to be more understanding during these processes. So as Rich was mentioning, as we know, most Black and brown individuals are the individuals that take up the population of individuals who are in jails and prisons, which means that when you see that, most white Americans feel like they did that and they should do their time. But statistically, we have to realize that Black and brown individuals are not being locked up due to their crimes. They're being locked up due to their race. So if we can keep that in mind when we're thinking about individuals coming home and some of those charges, there is studies that show that there's color that's being locked up. It's not actually crime sometimes. So I just wanted to include that.
Thank you. What would you maybe do? One or two of you want to speak to maybe bias that you see amongst family members, like individuals versus systems? What do you see?
Some of the same stuff.
Okay.
Of family members say, hey, well, if they can't come to the family reunion dinner, they should have stayed where they were at, or whatever the case may be. It's just most people don't know what it's like to be incarcerated or what the transition is. But also family members can have resentment for that person not being present for a very long time, and that resentment can turn into hardened biases just to that individual in particular, where there's a conflict in getting those two family members back on the same page with each other. And I'm the first to say it, like I have no problem speaking to my lived experience, but I'm not very close to my siblings. I have an older brother and sister and younger sisters that I'm just not that close to anymore. 23 years of separation puts you in a space where it's like you acquaintances almost.
Well, one of the things we talked about, Rich, in a few of our conversations, too, that I think is important is that the incarceration of a family member is traumatic for that family, too. So it's not just the individual that is incarcerated. It's a traumatic experience for a family to lose a loved one, or even deal with the stigma of having a loved one who maybe has certain charges, or so it's traumatic for the entire family. I've heard folks say that the whole family gets the sentence.
Yes, and Dee Dee can speak to that in a lot more intimate manner than myself, because I've never had a family member that I went to visit in prison. I was the family member who maybe I got a visit, maybe I didn't, maybe my aunt would come this time, maybe my grandmother would. But to that point, it was something that you mentioned I don't want to miss. We don't understand the collateral consequences of a criminal conviction. We incarcerate one person for 5 years. Let's say that person is a parent, a mother, if you will, of two children, 2 years old. By the time that she is released from incarceration, those children are 8 and 6. They are well on their way to trying to understand what the world has for them and what their place is in this world. And the one thing that they never got was that intimate bonding and direction from their mother. That can prove very traumatic for an individual, a young child in their developmental stages. And I'm sure that Ms. Taylor can speak to the collateral consequences of a criminal conviction of a parent.
Absolutely. I tell individuals when they ask me a little about my dad and my story, I let them know I've been visiting jail since 5 years old. I'm like almost comfortable behind bars almost sometimes, and that shouldn't be my experience. And not to mention, not only is that my experience, but that's also my sister Breonna Taylor's experience, who has never been able to see our dad outside of jail. So when I think about the impact of that, not only as a kid, I used to be embarrassed telling individuals that my dad is locked up, because they'll see me as this bright young woman, successful, smart, not knowing that my father is in jail right now and has been in jail for over 28 years. Not to mention, when Breonna passed away, thinking about who her father was. I know that brought a little embarrassment to our family just overall. So it is something that impacts everybody, and it's not easy for anyone. And I do get a little bit emotional talking about this because, again, this is my life experience. I've literally been behind bars since 5 years old, and I don't know too many people who can say that and feel comfortable with that. And psychologically, I think sometimes, like, why am I so comfortable? Why is my opinion distorted in that way? And I just don't want that experience for anyone. So yes, it does affect the entire family.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's give our panel a hand. All right, I think that is the last of our pre-recorded questions. We are going to move into now our audience Q&A. We're going to move into our audience Q&A. We have a microphone here at the front. If you have a question or a comment that you would like to address to the panel, you're welcome to come to the mic. Also, we have Christine here, who's up here in the front. If you would prefer Christine to bring you a mic, just raise your hand and she will bring you a mic. I'm just gonna give you all a chance to get a sip of water, but get your questions ready. Our online audience, please drop your questions in the chat and we will be answering those questions from our online audience as well. Go ahead.
Oh, ready?
Yes.
Good evening, and thank you for all for excellent responses. My question is to my friend Rich. So one of the things we're always looking at is the post-traumatic syndrome and trauma from being incarcerated. And I know you were a young man going to the facility, but what kind of things could have benefited you in regards to that trauma not developing?
Sure. You guys have been talking. No, I'm real quick story. I'm 17 years old, Riverside Correctional Facility, Ionia, Michigan. I'm told that I need to take this like violence prevention class, but I'm only going to be at this facility for about 30 days. I'm then transferred to an adult prison. At the time I was incarcerated, there was no youth jail or youth facility for youthful offenders. And I spent the remaining 22 years in adult prisons. Prior to my release, I'm 38 years old, and I'm told that I need to take violence prevention program. Now, I've probably been 17, 18 years major misconduct free at that time, which does not mean that I was not that I didn't do anything that would get me in trouble. It just I didn't get caught for it. But I reflected back on that initial cognitive behavioral therapy model that was given to me as a 17-year-old for about 10 days. And I asked the facilitator of violence prevention program, which is another CBT model, why isn't this given to us at the beginning of a jail sentence? Why haven't you not given me the opportunity to unpack the trauma, unpack the emotional scars that I had prior to coming to prison? I may have been a better model inmate, if you will. Maybe I would not have placed myself in positions to assault other inmates and be placed in segregation for a year at a time, 8 months at a time, 14 months at a time. So often it is the fact that we look at force-feeding individuals on their way out of prison when we should be looking at the front-end services. Another hat that I wear, I will be introducing a post-traumatic prison disorder, a piece of legislation into the New York legislature here in a couple of weeks for Silent Cry, Inc., a small organization that is working out of New York as well as the Detroit area to get that established. We're working to get that here introduced here in Michigan as well, so that folks who are returning from incarceration automatically through law have a direct vehicle to mental health services upon their return to their communities.
I'm sorry. I have a question for Ms. Taylor, but I have one more question for Rich real quick.
Okay.
So Rich, are you saying unpacking the trauma that you're struggling with as you enter the prison helps you not obtain more trauma, is what I'm hearing?
Is going to assist you in dealing with the traumatic experience of being incarcerated once you understand triggers, emotional triggers, psychological triggers that you already currently have. It is going to help you in that process or in your journey to process the information and trauma that is inevitably going to happen throughout the duration of your incarceration. Yes.
Incredible response. I love it. Ms. Taylor, from an individual, from an organizational, and from a community standpoint, for loved ones, how do we better support the loved ones who have a loved one in a facility? So I know, again, same example, a little different because you were much younger when your dad went away. So the process for you is much opposite than most people, but even as a small person, as a teenager, or even now as an adult, what can we look at and be better at to support the family members who are still in the community?
Yeah, good question. So the biggest thing is just trying to be as understanding as possible. I know that's hard to do sometimes, especially when you don't understand the system or never been through the system. So just fostering that understanding is very important, and also not treating your loved ones like a person that just committed a crime, but still valuing some of the things that you love and know about them is also very important to think about. So overall, I would just say trying to stay active in communication with them, trying to write them, trying to visit them. Those are all small measures that you can take that can make huge steps once an individual comes home. As I mentioned, building that relationship, all of us have kind of mentioned that in a way, is rebuilding that relationship is probably the hardest thing that a person can do. So if you start to foster that relationship from the start, then you can't lose focus throughout the entire bid. So, yeah.
Thank you. Others? I, as a facilitator, made a mistake. I want to direct your attention to the survey. I know some may not be able to stay to the very end, but we do want your feedback, so we'll show this again. We're going to keep that up, but definitely give us your feedback about tonight's event. All right, other questions from the audience or comments? Yeah.
Hi, what would you say is the greatest success story that you've seen for released individuals, either individually or as a collection? And why do you think that was successful when other similar situations did not succeed?
Well, there's a lot of success stories, and they're so individualized that it's hard to kind of say, hey, this seems to be the mixture that works, and this is for these clients that are back already. It didn't seem to work. But I would say for me, sometimes you meet a client that you think, nope, it's just not working. They're going to be back. No matter what I try, it just doesn't seem to be impacting them. And then all of a sudden, they get out and holy cow, they do great. And they, get a job and they go to school, they get a degree. I've run into them sometimes on the street and, everything's going great. One of them's an accountant now. And when I was working with him, I would have never thought I just didn't think he would get there. And he exceeded all of my expectations. So there's clients that you think they just, for whatever reason, they're probably not going to make it. And they prove you wrong and you're really happy. And then there's the clients that you think there's nobody can hold them down, and they're back in a week. And so it's really hard to say who will or who won't, because the ones that you think won't do and the ones that you think will don't. Mm-hmm. But it's hard to tell when they're leaving.
I think it's tricky success is different to everybody. How do you even define that? Everybody's dealt a wildly different hand walking out of those doors. And so, for somebody just coming out and staying out and grinding out a job is incredibly successful to them, while somebody else might come out and really take off and start their own business, and family relationships are built back up. And so to them, success is a totally different thing. So it becomes a really tricky thing to define from one person to the next.
Real quick anecdote for that. When I left prison, I left the Bellamy Creek Correctional Facility in Ionia, and I was in the reentry program. It's like 60 days. When you get to reentry, you have 60 days before you're released back to the community. About a week after being out, I went to have breakfast at a local place, and I seen this guy who was a Caucasian kid, probably late 20s, early 30s, who had been on the tier across the hall from me. We played basketball for the last couple of weeks that I was there together, just generally, people out here having recreation. And he was, while I was paying for my bill, he was there to put in an application. We had on the same coat that everybody is released in, the same pair of shoes, and a pair of sweatpants, and this is in the middle of the winter of 2017. I gave him some money for him to have breakfast and asked what he was doing there, what he had going on. He explained to me he was trying to put in an application to get a job. And I looked at him like, in my head I'm saying, why in the hell do you still have this stuff on? But in that moment I realized that his transition and his support system was different than mine. He didn't have the level of support that I had. He didn't have a family member who opened their home to him like me. He was struggling to make a few dollars just to survive from day to day. So it's different for everybody. Success is going to look different for everybody depending on what that support system looks like. I was fortunate enough to have the support of my father and other family members who, played a very integral role in me having socialization throughout the duration of my incarceration. So it's the support system that's going to make the biggest difference.
Absolutely. I can give a story, but first thing I want to say is success is rich as well, because what he mentioned in the panel discussion with him and my dad literally in the same cell together, being youth together, going to jail and prison together, that is all true. So to see Rich up here right now, it's inspiring. That it makes me feel like my dad can be next, can be successful, and I really do appreciate Rich for being so resilient during this process. And lastly, I've been working with a client, for about 6 months now. It's a woman client. She was released and she struggled. Her son held a lot of resentment towards her. She, of course, didn't have any employment, didn't have any vehicle or anything like that. And here it is 6 months later, she was able to get back on her feet with a little of my support, a little family support, and now the home that she's living in, mind you, she struggled to find a home. So she had to rent a home that was overpriced for her, and the landlord was still kind of skeptical about whether they really wanted to rent to her or not. But here it is 6 months later, and the landlord is offering her to buy the home. She can make payments to buy the home now. So it just shows that there is success when you are supported. There's success when you have successful reentry program, and there's success when you have community members that want to help those impacted by the criminal justice system.
Thank you. You all agree that one of the big challenges is being able to find a job once you exit the system. Are there any examples of organizations or corporations that have made a difference and have made an effort to create more availability for these individuals to access their job in their organizations? Do you have any good examples of these type of organizations here in our region? Sure.
Specifically to your question, I remember the ACLU had a program, a project handful of years ago called the Smart Justice Program. It was a nationwide effort to dismantle mass incarceration, or half the prison population in America. I believe they hired well over 1,500 formerly incarcerated persons to push that campaign. Nonprofit organizations, and we won't get into the gritty details of it, but nonprofit organizations that are advocating for equitable social equity oftentimes are affording formerly incarcerated persons direct tracks to careers in the nonprofit sector. But when we look at more of the business sector, for-profit businesses aren't as apt to hire those individuals just based on that background, which is why we see so many formerly incarcerated persons who are now entrepreneurs. But yes, there are, any nonprofit that is working in a social justice area usually is affording formerly incarcerated persons a track to a career that they are not going to find in most other areas of professional pro-social life.
I would add to that there is an obstacle because there's a lot of jobs out there right now. But what happens a lot of times with this population, you have to go through a temporary service, so you get in, you're the first one to be sent home if there's not enough work today. So it becomes kind of unstable. You don't know how many hours you're getting. You're on the bottom of the pay scale. And then it's differing ranges, but after like 6 months or a year, you're supposed to get hired in. And a lot of times that doesn't happen. And so, because then obviously you have to pay you the wages that the regular staff are making, and now you're full-time and all kinds of things. So there is within the system, there's help for this population, but the system itself really can get in the way also, because it's a lot of temptation. I don't want to go through a class that takes a month before I even go look for a job if I can go tomorrow and start working and start making money and paying my way. But it's a little bit of a trap, because a lot of times those jobs don't work out.
Thank you. My name is Megan. I work for an organization called the Lakeshore Nonprofit Alliance. We're based in Ottawa County, so there's still some good folks hanging out in Ottawa County. And I'll just do a shout out to Arbor Circle, who is one of our members, which is, in part why I'm here today, but also because this matters. So thanks so much to our panelists. I'll just formally state my bias, put it way out there. Like, I believe that nonprofits are doing the nitty-gritty, the hard stuff, the coming up with the creative solution, doing less with more, all of the things, and you all are powering that work. So I'm so grateful for all of you who are working for nonprofits, who are often the ones who are coming up with solutions that collectively we haven't figured out how to solve for. So thanks so much to Arbor Circle and all of the panelists. Somebody, and I think maybe was it West Michigan Works? You shared something that sparked something in me because of the work that I'm involved in, which you touched on a holistic approach and that whole idea of better together and referrals and processes, and that's something that I'm passionate about and that we see success in, is when organizations are connected to each other and there are good processes for that. And I'm betting that there are a bunch of nonprofit people in the room here, because there usually are when we're in these spaces, because we're the ones that care and show up, right? Always for these things. So I bet others, are curious to hear with the organizations they represent, what does a great referral process, a great partnership, a great collaboration that you all are involved in look like? I'd love to hear some examples of that.
Well, I could speak directly. We used to have a program at Arbor Circle called Relink, and it was run by peers.
My favorite program of all time.
It was one of mine too.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I'm using past tense
Yes.
To describe it, but It was run by peers, and they would go into the jail and help returning citizens 30 days before they got out. They would kind of start that relationship, pick them up from jail, drive them home, get started on all the things that you need to do. And that was a great program. But one of the things we tried to develop, and it does get hard, I'm not going to say it was easy, but we had about a dozen other organizations within this group, and we had one intake. So I have a new client come in, we fill the paperwork out once, and then that paperwork should follow you to any of those other 12 organizations so that you don't have to fill it out all over again. And also, it was kind of supposed to fast track people. So if you ran a program that would help with GED, all we needed to do was make a call, get you over there, and you're starting, instead of, that process that all organizations have. And so what we tried to do with Relink was just really reduce that intake time for any of the 12 organizations. And then we would drive you there if you needed the ride. And so we were trying to reduce all the obstacles, and that way guys will hopefully stay motivated and utilize what's there.
And that program used peers, like you said, pretty exclusively, so they were developing those relationships.
Supervising.
You were wonderful. You are amazing, Mike.
Yeah, I think it's important that we're not compounding barriers on top of barriers. So for me, I like having a warm handoff, an individual, a person that I can refer them directly to, instead of here's a general 800 number, or here's a location that you can go to, but here's a real person. I know them. I'm referring you to them because I know they will follow through, and it makes this process more seamless for you to get the services on down the line that you need. I think that's really important.
Similar to what he was saying, I believe that one thing that I do in my organization is I make sure I educate myself on community resources. Any new resource out, any event happening, I'm making sure I'm there, getting to know the individuals who they serve and the individuals who work for the organization. So I think that has been a great thing for me, just making sure I'm in these spaces intentionally. And not to mention, what I found works really well is the organizations that I do plan to refer to, I ask them if they have like something where we can share information. Like I have clients sign off on a document letting me know that I'm able to get their information from a different organization or share it or so on. So I did see that has eliminated many barriers to applying and doing the intake process and so on.
That was a great question, and I'm hopeful that what I'm about to say adds value to what has already been said. I would like to see nonprofit leadership learn the best practices of stepping up and then stepping back. Formerly incarcerated people are the experts in the carceral state. Mm-hmm. They need to be leading the efforts to correct what has been wrong. So hopefully nonprofit agencies can professionally develop the folks who they have coming in as clients or members to receive services, so that they then can step away and allow those folks to be the leaders and changing the trajectory of how we help them.
That was a great close to that. I'm David Cliggscales. I'm from My Peer Mentoring here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We are that nonprofit. We're designed by peers that we provide returning citizens with productive citizens who are their peers. But for my question is really, why are these programs, we've discussed at least 2 or 3 programs that no longer exist. And outside of Mike's money issues, what other issues? Absolutely, right? That's the real key.
Yeah.
But as a nonprofit, and we establish programs, a lot of times they're motivated by grants, obviously. But what do you see as, what problems tend to take programs down outside of directors not stepping up and then stepping back, right? What else?
Compassion fatigue.
Oh, yeah.
We're fatigued with being compassionate for folks who've committed crimes and been incarcerated.
Okay, you can't just like drop your mic now. You got to pick the mic back up and unpack that.
But no, yeah, no, we're tired of it. If you recall, the Governor Whitmer had a task force that was ensembled here, I don't know, 3, 4, maybe 5 years ago, and at one point they had to field over 100 pieces of legislation for changes to the carceral reality here in Michigan. Your legislature is tired of hearing of it. Your local leadership is tired of hearing of it. They've done just about everything in the world to assist, in their minds, to assist returning citizens or ex-felons, and they are fatigued with having compassion for this population. So when you get them, when you receive someone from the carceral reality who's returned from, after 15 years, it's like, hey, look, we've done everything in the world we can. We're not going to spend another $18,000 on your professional development to make sure that you understand how to operate Microsoft Office 365. I'm not going to designate another staff member to train you in project management tools. I just want to get you in here and use your trauma and your experience for funding purposes, and then we'll figure out somewhere to get you. Maybe we can move you over to Mike, and Mike can help find you some employment or some mental health services, and then we kick you to Network 180 and Michigan Works and see if we can't get you a manual labor job.
I believe one of those ways to stifle compassion's, what do you call it, compassion? Fatigue would be community assistance. And one of the issues that have been expressed to me is that a lot of places will say, let's say churches will say, relative, that, hey, we tried. We offered basketball, barbecue, blah, blah, blah. How do we tell the community that that's not always the way in to this demographic, is not always basketball church?
You have to say it very directly and very sternly. I think that large in part it is I don't want to say fear, but the trepidation that the expert yourself may have, not you per se, but somebody in your position who has the lived experience of incarceration, just the trepidation of being received correctly. I don't know if they're going to take this. I don't know if I actually do know what I'm talking about. And then that, this all goes back to whether or not they've had the right reintegration to their society and community, whether or not they had a mentor to help them understand ways to articulate a program, ways to articulate the needs of that population. So it's just case by case basis, community to community basis, but we have to start employing best practices when it comes to making sure that folks understand the need of compassion and empathy for this particular sensitive demographic. I hope that answers your question.
I would add a little to that sometimes the people that mean well, and there's a lot of them in Grand Rapids Church, but the people doing the planning aren't the people that experience the return. Mm-hmm. So I could put all kinds of things together, but if it's probably going to match what I would envision would help me. Mm-hmm. So for me, it would be I could probably help the guy returning to small town USA that's a middle class American, right? I could create a great program for him or her. But so the wrong people are doing the planning. And so I think what has to happen is the people that have experienced it need to go to the churches or go to the nonprofits or go to whomever that's willing to listen and say, I would like to get involved in that, but what would it look like? Now, you do have to couple it with, like you brought up, the research. It can't just feel good. Mm-hmm. There's got to be something attached to it that actually shows it helps. And so we can't just church basketball. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I sure wish I could still play basketball. But it's probably not actually going to move the needle. It might be something we still do for fun, but what else is out there that actually impacts this population in a productive way?
And I would just add education. Informing, educating the community is the first step, I'll say, because it's a huge thing to accomplish. But definitely education, and as they both mentioned, ensuring that individuals who have been impacted directly are involved in those conversations. So just continue to encourage those people to reach out to someone who, have been impacted or something of that nature.
I would say too, what you all are saying is really impactful in the sense that oftentimes organizations or systems build programming and then they bring impacted individuals, whether they're returning citizens or what have you, they bring them to the table and say, look at all this we did for you. Isn't this good? Thumbs up. But they weren't intentional about having them in the process. So sometimes what it feels is like you're looking for us to stamp what you've already prepared. We're not integral to the process. We just want you there at the press conference, or we want you there to be grateful for what we put together, but that's not integrating folks and bringing them to the table to help make decisions.
Yeah, I'm gonna make a comment, and I hope that I don't offend anybody's sensibilities. Trauma porn is real. So you have an organization that says, hey, we have 7 formerly incarcerated juvenile lifers that we're working on a program of, we want to create an opportunity for mental health services, this wraparound holistic idea that we're going to wrap our arms around these folks as a community. And they usher them out and say, hey, here's so-and-so who spent X amount of years in prison, and yada, 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 yada. And then all of these great philanthropic organizations say, yeah, sure, we got tons of money for you for that program. But when the planning happens, it's the middle class folks who are saying, hey, a strategic plan for the remainder of the next 3 years is going to incorporate X, Y, and Z. And then you say, well, to the 7 individuals who you use to pimp their trauma to get that funding, you're asking them to buy into that campaign, buy into that initiative. A mantra of mine is, if I'm not at the table, I'm on the menu. I don't like being on the menu so much. I'd rather be in the strategic planning phase to assist you and help you all understand what you are dealing with, because let's face it, you probably don't know. And that doesn't mean that that I'm better, you're worse. It's different. And in understanding a very sensitive population, such as persons who have been impacted by the criminal legal system, let's let the experts tell us what we need to do.
Thank you. We have someone at the mic that wants to make a statement.
Hi, my name is Deborah. I'm a volunteer here, and I'm a disabled veteran. I was a single mother that was raising my 3 kids all alone with no child support. My youngest, my son, he had always been a special needs guy growing up. So I pretty much went through every agency here, new ones, old ones, and we could never find somebody that was suitable for my son, that showed interest, besides us feeling like we're just another paycheck to them. There was many times where counselors come in, oh, I'm from this agency. He meets with my son. We'll never see him again. Or there was an agency we were at. The counselor wound up getting fired. I didn't know this. He was visiting my son for 6 months, acting like he was still the counselor. How did he get away with that? I don't know. My son, there was a time period where he didn't want to take his medicine. He wanted a break from me, so he went and stayed at Exodus Place. And during that time, he had dreadlocks, saggy pants, and there was a gentleman that would constantly nag him, comb your hair, pull your pants up. And for my son, he kept stuff inside instead of addressing it. So one particular weekend, he had gotten his check. I took him to cash his check. He went back to Exodus Place. Within 3 days, he was able to buy a gun off the streets, and he shot and killed this guy in self-defense. They gave my son 37 years. But when we first got into that courtroom, I refused to let the system treat him like a revolving door, like they're used to doing with everybody else, especially black men, because I'm proud to say that, because it affected my family, with the man being absent in the house. And it makes a world of a difference. I made sure he went to a special needs prison. My son, today would have been his birthday. July 28th, he committed suicide because he didn't think he could make it out. He didn't think he was going to ever get out. So even to this day, I don't understand how he was able to get a gun so quick. And how was he able to be in a situation where he had to defend himself? And I still feel like it was one-sided in the courtroom. I didn't get a chance to speak, but he didn't let his family speak, who was to say he wasn't on his medicine. So gun violence is on my list, along with mental illness for sure. And believe me, ever since I found out the age in which a male starts developing schizophrenia, I let everybody that I know that can happen, because stuff is never talked about, especially in the family. They want to hide it or brush it under. Just like my family kept it hidden from me that my mother committed suicide. I didn't find out till I'm 35 years old. So I felt like I needed to speak and to try to be at rest with my son. Thank you.
No, thank you. I mean, I could tell you statistically what the population of Department of Corrections deals with mental health issues, but she just explained to you and gave you a firsthand anecdotal experience on what it is like to deal with mental health issues and be incarcerated. At one point, Michigan had a very wide array of psychiatric institutions that were closed during the 1970s and the early 80s, when we removed and changed policies that would have helped those folks reintegrate into society in a different fashion. And we treat impoverished communities like criminals. We have criminalized poverty, and mental health is one of those buckets of folks that we have criminalized here in this state. Thank you for sharing that.
And just to offer you a little piece, I don't know where she went. I sit on an advisory board with law enforcement, and just seeing how we can improve some of these things that are happening inside of our community. And one major thing that is happening that's going to be taking place soon is they've actually created an entire system for individuals with mental health issues. So they would no longer go to jail anymore. They'll go right to a resource center in order to help help them. They're going to be diagnosed and put in the right hands. So I can't bring your son back, but I can let you know that I have fought for change like that, and I appreciate you for sharing that. And thank you for your services too as well.
All right, any more questions? We are heading towards wrapping up our evening, but we do have time for a couple more questions or comments if anybody wants to share. All right, don't be shy.
Sorry.
That's
Me
all,
again.
no, don't be sorry.
But it's for Mike. Seeing as how I think this evening more so we've dealt with more long-term returning citizen type processes. What would you say is really the bigger problems in the county jail, which we see a higher sense of recidivism because you're, short time, in, out, in, out. What do you think what do you see their bigger issues being, and what would you suggest be the cure to that or the fix?
So you're asking me to create utopia, which Kathy, my supervisor, knows. I go off on that question. Okay, so there's at any one time 900 to 1,100 people in the Kent County Jail, right? So, and we know that something brought them under the attention of law enforcement. And right now in our programs, we have single-digit numbers. Right? So, and now I know there's other programs that are in the jail also, but there's a lot of obstacles to who we can see. If I had my way, everybody that came into the jail would be offered some mental health, an assessment, or a SUD, substance use assessment, and try to figure out what help can we give them that might impact why they're there. The other thing I think is there's just a lot of, we've seen a shift in the population at the jail. Our programs it was very easy to find people with a substance use disorder. But what we're finding is there has been a shift at the courts, and so the people in the jail tend to be what we call higher risk, or they have thought patterns that put them at a lot more risk. It's not just SUD. And so one of the things I talk to especially my new staff about, you really are assessing for three things. Is there a mental health issue? Is there a substance use issue? And is there an antisocial thought pattern issue? Because we can fix the other two pretty easily. But that antisocial piece, and I know that sounds real negative, but it's not. It's just thinking patterns that put me at risk. Do I see the world in a way where maybe I have no hope that no matter how hard I try, I'm not getting ahead anyway, so why would I try? I might as well live on this side of the law. Maybe it's trauma. Almost, I'd say 99% of our women, but 60-70% of our men struggle with trauma. They don't even know it's trauma. They just think that's how life was. And so when you really start looking at their symptoms and helping them understand it, they start to see it differently. But the thinking, I think, is a harder thing to impact. It's really hard to give somebody hope if they have no hope. It's really hard to help them see the world where they're not seeing opportunities. They have to start seeing like the path that'll take them there and trusting that it will work if they stay on the path. And all these obstacles that they run into when they leave are things that kind of prove to them, yep, it won't work. See, I've already been to 5 interviews and don't have a job. And so that's very real. So I do think the population in the jail, everybody should be getting screened in some way, offered help in some way, work with them into the community, not just in jail, help with the families if that's one of the factors that might help this person, because many of our guys, I think 65% of the people in the jail last year identified as having children. So that's a lot of kids. right? And those kids, as we've already heard, are being impacted by that person being in the jail. So I just think, you know, I keep going back to put your money where your mouth is. Like, we need to increase the services that are in there and really do provide enough that helps the person leave and have an opportunity.
Anyone else want to speak to that?
Outside of, and I don't know if these numbers are very near accurate or off, and maybe you notice, but about 60 to 65% of the persons that are in the Kent County Jail are held there pre-trial. So they haven't even been convicted of a crime yet. So we're going back to criminalizing poverty. When you think about someone who may have a traffic ticket, they get pulled over, they don't have registration isn't accurate, the tags aren't accurate, no insurance on the vehicle, that vehicle is towed, that person goes to jail, they miss work, they get fired, they no longer have an apartment to pay rent to, they don't even have a job any longer to receive a check. Now that person can't even show up to court typically, and we'll say, well, what do you mean? We notified them. Yeah, but they don't work out. They don't operate off of email. They're no longer at the residence that they were at because they couldn't pay for it any longer. Now they live with their uncle on the other side of town. They never received the letter to appear at court. Now there's a warrant issued for that person, and they're told that they have to spend 5 months in the county jail because of this chance issue, this situation that happened over a traffic stop. And these are the persons who we have sitting in our county jails, typically.
Thank you. All right, let's give our panelists another hand. Give yourselves a hand. I'm just checking with our social media mavens in the back that we don't have any online questions before we close out. No? Okay. All right. Well, thank you all so much. It's been such a rich discussion. I'm so inspired by all of your comments, and the questions and comments that you all made were great. This is the purpose of Growing Together, is to bring our community together to honor Dr. King's legacy by addressing issues that we're facing in our communities today.
We have one more question.
Oh, one more question. Okay, yes.
Good evening. Sorry, I didn't know that we were ending. Sorry, but I wanted to talk about, you talked a lot about co-occurring disorders, so mental health and substance use disorders. And so I'm wondering, for the individuals that we have in the prisons and the jail system, do you believe that the corrections officers and the staff that are working in those facilities are equipped to handle that? I've had the privilege myself to be a corrections officer, and I know firsthand that a lot of the people who I'm worked with did not have the experience as far as mental health, substance use, understanding what any of these things look like and identifying what needs to be done. Even having nurses on staff 24/7 to even handle the things that the individuals in the prisons and the jails are dealing with. So my question is, are the individuals who are assisting those in jails and prison equipped to handle the mental health and substance use? And if they are not, what are we doing about that in order for them to receive the help that they need?
Absolutely not. Throughout the duration of my time being incarcerated, I think I went to segregation 4 or 5 times for extended periods. I've worked in segregation units and maximum security facilities, and the vast majority of the persons who are housed there are mental health patients. This is one of the most undesirable populations within prison. So what corrections officers do and administrators do is they throw them in segregation for erroneous behavior that is not consistent with model behavior for prison. They absolutely aren't equipped to deal with it, and I think the only way that we can ensure some equitable approaches to that is let's not worry about who's going to be the president. Let's worry about who our state reps and senators are going to be, because these are the folks who are allowing appropriations committees to fund aspects of incarceration that just aren't conducive to the population that they're serving.
Go ahead. Oh. Well, I would quickly, I'll throw in there that one of the things we did in our program, one of the COs became kind of a partner of ours, and so he would actually be active into groups and
What
help.
is a CO?
Corrections officer. And so when we first started, it was rough. There was a lot of pushback. The COs really did not, they thought we were all tree huggers. What eventually happened was they started to trust us a little more. I did a training with them, and that was rough. They did not like me, but we broke the ice. What happened was the jail, what they tried to do was kind of figure out what COs have the personality for a pod like that, where they're a little bit more compassionate, a little bit more, they understand the big picture of programming. They're a little more supportive of some of these struggles, and they would shift them over to work in our pod, which we loved because we could work as a team. However, that's like 5% of the CO population, and we ran into a lot of struggles. And frankly, it's because of the culture of corrections. It's going to take years to overcome that, and part of that is the reality that sometimes you're working with people that are hard to work with. Like they're sneaking their medications, they're doing other things that they shouldn't be doing. And so a lot of focus goes to security, not on how do we help them as humans. And so I get there's a push and a pull, and their role really is keep people from harming each other and leaving the building, frankly. But there has to be a culture shift where programs like ours can come in, work with them, help them deliver better services, because right now they're just not equipped to do that.
In my opinion, not only is it those correction officers, but I also feel like law enforcement is also a part of that system that is not educated enough for the people that they serve. We know that correction officers and law enforcement both have their own mental health issues, just dealing with survival, dealing with family, dealing with the stress of the job, and so on. So I don't think that the individuals are bad, but I don't think that they have the proper training in order to be the most productive during their jobs. And this subject is actually near and dear to my heart because my sister was shot and killed by law enforcement. So what I've done is be very proactive in this experience, and I've created a program called HEAL, and that's helping eradicate adverse law enforcement. And so what I do is go inside of jails and prisons, and I educate law enforcement on those poor police practices, those implicit biases, and so on, whatever is needed in order for them to understand and learn the people that they serve. So I am active in that process, and overall, my organization was created due to the gaps that I've seen in our system. So I'm very proactive when it comes to educating and informing, and I actually like to be in those spaces that make law enforcement and correctional officers really think about things and sometimes make them feel a little bit uncomfortable, because that's how you grow sometimes. So I'm always open and willing to talk about those experiences. Many people are like, why are you even by law enforcement? Why are you even going inside of jails? Like, what is wrong with you, Dee Dee? And so I chose to turn my pain into purpose. And purpose is making sure that these same incidents don't keep happening.
Thank you.
I think I would add, prior to my current role, I spent 15 years in the behavioral health space working in trauma-focused residential treatment centers, in addictions-focused programming. And I think, to me, it takes a real grassroots effort. I think in addition to the funding and the appropriations committees, if you think about the systemic setup of our prisons and of our police forces, those in leadership roles have come up through that same system. They only know one way of thinking. So getting people in there like Mike, who's doing those on the ground boots on the ground training, changing those mindsets, educating, and then they're growing up through that system is a way where we're going to see some real long-term sustainable change. It's not going to happen overnight.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, we are going to wrap up once again. Let's give our panel another hand. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Again, please give us your feedback. Scan that QR code and give us your feedback. We really want to hear from everyone that was here tonight. And then we want to once again thank our sponsors, Horizon Bank, Veniclausen, Grand Valley, Fifth Third, Hungerford Nichols, I can't see them all, SISMA, Raymond James, Micah Myers, PCE, and Urban League of West Michigan. They made this event possible, so we are grateful for their support. And yeah, we are just glad that you came out. We want to get you out 5 minutes early. So our panel will be here for a couple of minutes, but thank you for coming out, and we really appreciate you helping us honor Dr. King's legacy tonight.
Thank you.